This program is coming to you via Relay 2 satellite, a spacecraft orbiting the Earth at a speed of over 17,000 miles per hour.
Xirtus.
Oh, hi there. My name is John Avery Whittaker, but you can call me Whit. And this is Odyssey. I was just working on one of my inventions here. Just a few last adjustments and... there. Hey, let's see if it works. Look at that, it works. Now all I need to discover is what it's supposed to do. But that's all right. Discovering new and exciting things is what we do best here on our side of the radio. So why don't you come along for today's Adventures in Odyssey?
Hey, hang on. Let me start recording here really quickly.
All right.
All right. We are up and running. Let's go.
Oh, fantastic. Phil Lollar, ladies and gentlemen, one of the coolest people in the world.
Wow.
I know. They think that kids from California know what's cool, I've heard. So it's kind of funny. In all my life, most of the media I've ever seen or heard, I think some of the stuff you've done has impacted me the most. So I was wondering anything.
I hope it's done it in a good way. I mean, I hope it's impacted you in a good way.
I mean, I guess we'll find that out in this conversation.
Sure.
The imagination station is kind of the Ignatian method of the 20th, 21st century crossover. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of depth that you gave kids that they didn't know about before. But let me preface that really quick. This is Phil Lollar from Focus on the Family's Adventures in Odyssey, amongst other things. I guess you did the Dr. Seuss. You helped in the Dr. Seuss show for a bit, even.
Yeah. I did a show back in the 90s called The Webulous World of Dr. Seuss. Did a couple of seasons of that, which was a lot of fun. Did a lot of things, actually. I was thinking about it the other day. I've done a lot of audio and video stuff throughout the late 80s and all of the 90s and the early 2000s. And so I was thinking about, especially for the Christian market, I was thinking, I don't think there's a kids show out there that was an audio drama that I didn't work on at some point. So
321 Penguins, even, right?
Yeah. We did Jungle Jam, 321 Penguins, Little Dogs on the Prairie. I did Roma Downey's Little Angels. I mean, there were all sorts of stuff that I either did voices on, or wrote and did voices on, or did voices on and produced. So
when did you decide that you were interested in media, and then why did you decide that you were interested in audio?
I decided I was interested in media as far as entertainment when I was very small. My mother used to tell me that I had this ability to be able to hear something and instantly repeat it ever since I was little, and remember it and then repeat it later. So I came of age during the infancy of television. Television was used by my parents as a babysitter. And so my mom would sit me down in front of the TV and then get all the housework done. And my older brother liked to go out, run around outside and play, but I was perfectly content to sit in front of the television and just absorb. And so I did. And then they used to sit me on a stool at parties that they would throw and say, okay, what did you hear on television today? And I would repeat all of the stuff that I heard on television that day. And I love the attention that it gave me. And I think that's when you first get bit by the bug. You say, oh, I really want to do this, and I really like to do this for a living. But then as you stop and think about it, as you get older and reflect on it, you think, well, I think we're all kind of born to do certain things. Most of us, some of us never find out what that is. But I was fortunate enough, and God blessed me enough to be able to say, okay, I think you need to be doing this. And so he sent me in the right paths, and I went up and down and backwards and forwards and sideways. But
that's another thing, is you're interested in spirituality. How long, was it just this instantaneous thing as a child, or how did that go?
Yeah, I was raised in a Christian family. As a matter of fact, I just completed an Adventures in Odyssey. We recorded an episode of a script that I wrote for the Wycliffe Bible translators. And the thing about Wycliffe is his followers were called Lollards. They had a D on the end of their name. And my family lore, one of the things that I always said in my family was, that my family always talked about, was when my ancestors came over from Europe to America, after the Mayflower or something like that, a long time ago, they dropped the D and the C in our name. And I said, there's no C in our name. And they would say, no, they dropped the D in the C as they were coming over. So Lollard to Lollar. But they were followers of John Wycliffe. They believed in Basically, they kind of set the stage for the Reformation to happen 100 years before Martin Luther, and 100 years before Calvin. All of those folks. So just completed the script for that. That's on my dad's side. On my mom's side, we were part of my family was part of a thing called the Restoration Movement in the church in America. It was after the Civil War, and they were big proponents and arguers and debaters for the churches of Christ, which are out there right now. And so, I grew up. I kind of come by all this from a heritage standpoint, as far as spirituality is concerned. And I've gone on my own path, of course, with a lot of this stuff, but it's all still very ingrained in me.
It's a reassuring thing. Over and over again, I see families have to hold certain amounts of what they care about. They can't just put kids in front of a TV. They have to say, oh, this is the thing I thought was interesting or important.
Yeah. Well, hopefully they'll watch the shows together. The whole idea behind Odyssey too. A lot of people would say, well, Odyssey is, a great thing for me to sit my kids in front of. But I heard something. My kids came to me the other day and they heard an episode, and you said this and this and this on the episode, and I just don't like the fact that you said that thing on the episode. And I went, why are you just letting your kids listen to this without you listening to it with them? Odyssey is not a babysitter. It's not meant to be a babysitter. It's meant for us to try to pass on Christian beliefs and Christian ethics and doctrine and things like that. Yes, but never in a vacuum. Never just by us indoctrinating your kids. We want you to sit down and say, we hold with that or we disagree with that.
Right.
That's what it should be. That's why Odyssey, even though it's marketed and billed as a kids show and targeted toward 8 to 12-year-olds, it's a show for the whole family. It's we write it that way on purpose.
I'm now seeing all my friends who have become parents. It clearly is. It's still deep. There's some stuff in there that's really deep.
One of the things we tried to do early on, I'll just say this, is I always said whenever we started writing Odyssey, whenever in the creation and formation of it, I said we need to take a Warner Brothers cartoon approach to this show, and they didn't know what I was talking about. And so I said, well, if you look at the old Warner Brothers cartoons, there's stuff in it for all ages. When you're a little bitty, you love when you're a little bitty kid, you love the colors and the characters and all the funny stuff. And get a little older, you like the slapstick. Get a little bit older, you like the voices. Get a little bit older, you understand, oh, there's a whole lot of humor in here that I never understood when I was a kid. And even when you're an adult, you can go back and look at them and say, oh my goodness, that's so hilarious, because no kid is ever going to get that joke, but that joke is very, very funny. So I said, we need to do this. Parents are going to be here if the trend happens, if it holds true that kids are going to listen to these over and over and over again, that means parents are going to listen to them over and over and over again too, in the car or wherever else they're going to be. And so we might as well put stuff in there for parents as well as kids.
So one of the episodes you wrote that I was thinking about earlier, because I went back and I looked through some of the ones that I really liked, and License to Drive, for instance. And License to Drive, I mean, it's a really important episode because you got the guy who thinks he's a genius, and then you got the lady who actually knows what she's doing, and she's very humble about it, but he has to accept her help to learn. I mean, these are the kinds of lessons that are beyond any generation, how you're going to deal with your family and communicating with each other. So there's also, though, like you said, that Warner Brothers approach. I guess you're right. Not a lot of other people understood it. It was a good thing that you did. As a kid, I saw and heard voices from Disney cartoons like the Gummy Bears were in, Adventures in Odyssey. But the thing that really blew my mind as a kid was that it was audio and not cartoon. Because at that point, probably, to get a few $100,000 or $1 million, for the right, cartoon people, and they can make whatever, but then they control the images in the kids' heads completely. And then Adventure Time was the opposite. It was like, let you imagine with sounds your own reality.
Yeah, that you're exactly right. That's 100% right. When whoever is going to invest into your project really controls your project. And movies, especially animated films, are very expensive to produce. But I think that audio drama is the best way to tell stories. Absolutely, bar none. I mean, I even like it over books. Books, you can get inside the character's head. You can kind of do that in audio drama. It's a little bit clunky to do that, but you can kind of do that in audio drama. But with audio drama, with a film, it's all laid out for you. You don't have to be an active participant. You sit back and watch and let it go, and you can be mindless and watch the film. And that's why there are a lot of mindless films out there. But with audio drama, you have to be actively engaged. You've got to sit down, really listen and listen hard to what's going on, and really get involved with the characters, really get involved with the story. And then you supply the images. That's what's lovely about it. It's a collaboration between listener and the producers of the show and the listener, because we're not going to give you everything. You have to supply the images, and you supply them in your brain. And anybody and everybody can enjoy that. And that's the reason I quite frankly was a little hesitant. I was sort of reticent to do the videos that actually we did on Odyssey. Because I thought, now we're telling them what Whit looks like. We're going to show them. We're going to show them what Connie and Eugene look like. We're going to show them what the town of Odyssey looks like. And it's no secret that I don't like any of the artwork on Odyssey. I don't think that's a secret. I've been disappointed by every single bit of artwork that's ever been produced for Odyssey, because it's not what I had in mind when I created it, and it's not what I had in mind. It's not what I want everybody else to see either, and I would rather everybody else supply their own images.
The kid, I'm just saying, as soon as I saw the cartoon, I was like, oh, this is great. But it didn't, the thing about the Odyssey was you go into the imagination station, right? And you imagine this reality, and then they give you sounds of the field that you're walking through, and then Christ is there, or someone who knew him. And like, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah. It's a way, that's our time machine. That's sort of our time machine, the imagination station. But it's a way to experience all of those wonderful stories through history, and then biblical stories and other stories as well, by going in and having an interactive experience. I mean, we were pretty ahead of our time, I think, although Star Trek The Next Generation came up with their holodecks almost exactly the same time as we came to Nation.
You guys were definitely before the Matrix by a generation.
But yeah, we were, before virtual reality became a thing, we were at least a generation ahead of time. So
what led to that, even the imagination station?
Well, we had done a couple of historical episodes. So the very first historical episode we did was, I think, the day Independence came, which was about the kid who he climbed up on a chair and he hit his head, and then he went back. He's a big Revolutionary War buff, and so he went back in time to the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And we had a lot of fun with that episode. It was really well received. But we thought, okay, well, we'd like to do more historical episodes. I really loved history, and I really loved historical episodes. And so we said, well, we want to do more of these kinds of episodes, but we can't have this kid just getting hit in the head every time. We're going to have to figure out something else. So the very next one that we did, so I created a device called the Environment Enhancer. And that was used in The Shepherd and the Giant. That's when Connie went and experienced David and Goliath, the whole David and Goliath story. And I thought, okay, well, that's a nice little thing, but it's just basically her with a pair of headphones on, basically doing what we're doing now with a pair of headphones on and a little bit of other enhancements so that it can sort of maneuver things the way it needs to move. She could interact, even though it was just audio, she could interact. But then after that, then we decided we wanted to do the crucifixion and resurrection. We wanted to do those stories, which were the first imagination station stories. And we figured, well, we need to have some device. We need to have some way of Dig Willow at that point getting into and out of the adventure, and what would that be? And we argued for a while as to what the imagination station was actually was. And Paul McCusker thought that it was really kind of like the cockpit of a helicopter. How you climb into it, and then you put on the glasses or whatever, or the screen appears in front of you, and then you just kind of have this imagination. And I said, no, it really is more like a room that you got to go into and walk around and maneuver and everything else. And then it lays it out before you as you go, as you're walking down a hallway. It's creating the hallway as you go. And so we went back and forth for a while, and then we said, it's audio drama. Let people figure it out on their own. They can figure out what it is. We don't have to tell everybody what it is. Just let them figure it out. And so that was, of course, that was the start of all that. And became a very, very big part of Adventures in Odyssey was the imagination stage. Still is.
Yeah.
This huge part of Odyssey and Wit's End. And I thought sooner or later reality is going to catch up with our fantasy world here, and then our technology is going to be just so outdated. But nobody's come up with this yet, so we're still way ahead of the curve. It's like somebody's going to come up with it sooner or later, and then our technology will be completely outdated. But it's like, well, wait a minute, we're still pretty ahead of the curve as far as that's concerned.
I mean, you could have an Adventures in Odyssey video game series.
I think there are a couple of them out there already. they're geared toward younger kids, but I think that there are, in fact, they have, from what I can tell, I think Facebook has all these sites, and there are people who play the Odyssey game, but they'll put it up on the screen and do interactive stuff with each other and whatnot. So that's fun.
You could put the Oculus Odyssey Adventures in Oculus, but I'm very curious about some of the archetypes, like the nation method. So it seems like there's a lot of that playing into Odyssey. It doesn't seem like there's anyone undereducated involved with the show. So I'm curious, like what did you guys think of him? Did you go through school? Did you study much Ignatian method, or where does this come from? Your imagination?
Yeah, I think I think all of us on the program who write for the program are of a kindred spirit in terms of our imaginations and what we want to do, and how my whole thing, I teach this stuff, and I'm trying to write a book about it, but it's not coming out the way I want. So, but I will siphon it out of my head one of these days. But my whole theory is that story is everything, because everything is stories. From the beginning of time, when God created time, God is the only one who's outside of time. From the beginning of time, when he created time and space, he created stories. Story is everything, because everything is story. So think about it in terms of, in the beginning, God created. This is the fifth word of the Bible. The first verb, the first action he ever did was create. So he created time and space. And think about the creation story. The first day he created this, then he rested, and then second day he created this and he rested. The third day he created this and rested. And all of those things that he created on the first day, the second day builds on the first, third day builds on the first and second, fourth day builds on the first, second, third. They all build on each other. And every day, at the end of the day, he looked back and he said, "It is good. It is good. It is good. It is good." And then when he reached the pinnacle of creation, which are human beings, male and female, created in his image, he looked back and he said, "Very good. This is very good." And if we're in his image, male and female, created in his image, and he is a creative God, then he created us to be creative. And how are we creative from our earliest days? What is our creativity involved? Storytelling. We tell each other stories. We didn't know how to write. We didn't know how to do anything else. We didn't know how to broadcast. We didn't know how to do anything else. We sat around campfires and told each other stories. And the stories were, what did you do today? Oh, I went out and killed a mastodon. I went out and killed, this, and I had to name all the animals. I had to do that. I mean, Adam and Eve were telling each other stories right from the beginning, from the get-go. And again, look at how God created everything. A day multiplied by another day, multiplied by another day, multiplied by another day. Well, what happens in your life when you get up? You have a goal. I got to get to work. I got to get to school. I got to get someplace. I got to do all that. I have stuff I have to do. So I have a goal. And now there's your dramatic need. You get up, there's your dramatic need right from there. What happens? All sorts of obstacles are in your path. I don't know where my clothes are. I don't know what I did with, somebody's using the bathroom and I can't get in there. I don't have any breakfast foods. I can't do it. I'm in traffic. There's no coffee. Whatever it is, you've got to overcome all these goals to achieve your dramatic need, which is to get to work. And then most people do that, but they don't look back at that and say, well, wait a minute, that was a story. Unless something huge happens, like there was a wreck on the freeway, there was a head laying in the middle of the road, body parts everywhere, and then they'll tell that story when they get to work. They don't think of what they just did as being a story, but it is. It's a story. You started off, you're the main character in the story, you have a dramatic need you have to meet, and there are all sorts of obstacles in your path that you have to overcome in order to fulfill your dramatic need. That's a story. Now that story bleeds into the next story. Now I'm at work. What do I have to do? I have to get everything done by lunch. And what's going to happen? There's all sorts of obstacles in my path to get all my work done by lunch. And I got to get all that stuff. That little story connects to the first story. And then the next part of it connects to the next story. And you go through that and you got a day. And then you go through a couple of days, another one of those. You add that day to the next day. Then you got a week. And then a week turns into a month, and a month years, and then years a whole lifetime. Your life is nothing but small stories interconnected. All the way through, interconnected. And here's the key. Here's the important thing to remember. Everybody needs to remember this. Remember where you are in the story. Remember where you are in the story. Because what happens in stories, in great stories, you go up and down and up and down and up. The protagonist has all sorts of problems, terrible things deep down in the bog, hitting rock bottom. They can't go anywhere. They can't do anything. It's over. All of their assets are gone. But what happens next? Something great happens next that pulls them out of the rock bottom, and then they are up. They're on top of the world. Okay, so that's the whole nature of life. And it's really important to understand the whole nature of life in that respect, because I see people all the time, whether on Facebook or I talk to them, and they're just deep in the mire, and they don't think they're ever going to change. It's not, this is my life. It's just terrible. And to the point where they're thinking suicide. And I'm thinking, boy, you can't do that, because look what happens next. Remember where you are in the story. What happened? You're in a great story. What happens next in the story? And it's really important for us to remember that you're in a story when we're on the mountaintop too, when we're on the high peaks too. That's especially important to remember, because what usually happens after that? Well, you go down. What goes up must come down. And so you think, okay, what am I being prepared to do next? When you're on the mountaintop, you think, well, remember where I am in the story, and what is this preparing me for next? And if you start thinking in terms of story, then you realize all these little things are interconnected together, and we move linearly through time. And that's what a story is, time and space.
It makes me wonder about your education in storytelling. So how long have you been thinking about, like, I guess I did see a bit of the interview where you talked about, like, I really liked the idea of the Iliad House. And so, you know, if you recall, like the Kickstarter, but then I saw this interview where you talked about how it was an idea you had forever,
for a long time.
And I never heard the original version of it, but like
nobody had. Well, you talk about the education. So I was one who really I was champing at the bit to get out and show what I could do. So out of high school, I went to college for a little while, but then I thought, this is just not for me. I feel like I'm wasting time here. So I went out and started looking for ways to express myself creatively. And that, of course, meant that you find jobs, whatever jobs you can get, and then you do whatever theater work you can, or whatever other work you can, whatever writing work you can, until you can get to a point where you can actually get published and people are starting to know you and know what you do. And so I did that for a long time, and I started working at Focus on the Family. I was hired to create audio drama, so I was hired to create Adventures in Odyssey back in 1986. And it premiered in 87, and then of course it's been going now for nearly 32 years. So that's a big part of it. But at one point, when I was involved with it and doing a lot of other things, I got to the point where you know what, I need to enhance my skill set. I really do need to do that. So that's when I thought very seriously. I said, I need to go back to school, and I was in my 40s. At that point, and I said, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway, and I started over. I went right to the basics. My first, they had to do an assessment test to find out where my placement was, where I could be in certain classes, and I said, I don't want to, whatever it is, I'm still starting over. And so my first math class was a number line. He drew a line on the board, and here's 0, here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, -1, -2, -3, -4, -5. This is a number line. This is who. And so that was my first college course, was that math course. But I started over, and I said, because I'm going to do it right this time. I'm not going to try to skip. I don't want to skip things. I really want to know and understand. And it was great. It was a wonderful experience to go back when you're in your 40s, because you really want to learn. And everybody kept saying, well, what do you want to do when you get out? I said, I already do what I want to do. I have the career. Now I just want the degrees. Now I want the knowledge. I want the learning. And of course, what I really loved as well was I found philosophy. I was going to go do the communications route, and then I took a philosophy course, and I went, oh, now I'm home. This is it. I love this. It was wonderful. So I took a whole bunch of philosophy courses, got an AA in philosophy, then went on to get a couple of bachelor's degrees, 2 bachelor's degrees. I did the practical thing, if you call it practical. I did the career thing, which was get degrees in what I was already doing too. So radio, TV, film, and then a philosophy degree. So 2 BAs, and then I went on to get my MFA and do a philosophy degree there too. So didn't finish the master's philosophy. I was thinking about that last night. I really want to go back, and I'm halfway done.
What are some of the
back or not? But
what are some of the philosophers that just really piqued your interest?
I always loved the Greeks. I think that they understood a whole lot more than we give them credit for. Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, wonderful. Aristotle's fantastic. The Poetics is great as far as storytelling is concerned. If you really want to understand about storytelling, read the Poetics. But I like the Nicomachean ethics too. Ethics was my big thing in philosophy, so I really loved ethics. I looked at it as practicality. How do we live? A lot of people took philosophy because it was all Ivy League, in the Ivy halls not Ivy League, but we're in the ivy covered halls of academia. And here's where we discuss that stuff, but we really don't take that outside of here. And I was all like, no, I'm looking for how I'm supposed to live. What does it mean to live a good life? What does it mean what does justice mean? How do those things apply to us? If we're going to do this, if we're going to learn all of this stuff and we're going to talk about it, how do we apply it in our lives? And that's the reason, of course, we're naturally drawn to C.S. Lewis, because he did all of that in his writings and in his work as well. But so then, Kant I loved Kant. He was great. Kant's categorical imperatives are awesome.
Good choice.
It was the big debate was Kantian duty, the whole idea of duty versus utilitarianism, which is, do the greatest amount of good for the greatest number of people involved.
But that can be kind of evil and selfish sometimes.
The thing about it is that we are a combination of both. If you think about America, if you think about what we're a combination of both. We do our duty, and we want people to do our duty. Kant says you do your duty, and to heck with the consequences. We don't care about the consequences. You're supposed to do your duty. Do your duty out of a goodwill, and the consequences are not up to you. It's up to something else. You've done your duty, and that's what it is. Utilitarianism says, no, we have to think about the next group. We have to think about what's the best for the upcoming consequences of everything in utilitarianism. We can't ignore consequences. So what's best for the greatest number of people here and the greatest over time and all this stuff. And we want to do both. There are times when we definitely want to be utilitarian in our thinking. We want to say, if I do this, what's going to be the outcome? How is it going to harm us later down the line? And then there are times when we say, I'm going to do my duty. I know what's right, and it doesn't matter what the consequences are. And so we want to teach our kids both. How does that work? How do we teach our kids both? It seems to be a completely opposites are going to butt heads here. So how do we do that? Well, interestingly enough, the way we do it is through Christ. The way that happens is through Christ Jesus. The way to solve philosophical conundrums is to think about the person of Jesus Christ. So one big problem with philosophy is change, constant change, versus being unchanging, versus everything being one. Okay, everything draws from one. Everything is one. I think it's Pericles versus Heraclitus. One of them said, everything is unified and one and unchanging. It all just comes back into the same thing, and it's all one. Whereas the other one said, no, you never step into the same river twice. As soon as you step in it again, it's a different river. Everything is constantly changing. Change is the only constant. And how do you resolve this? How do you blend those two things together? Interestingly enough, you blend them together in the person of Jesus Christ. God is unchanging. God is ever present. God will never change. He never has changed and never will change. But we are constant creatures of change. And humanity is a constant creature of change. God, Jesus Christ, is God, unchanging God, and always changing man. It's a fantastic, when you look at it that way, you go, oh, wow, I'm mind blown. Christ is the fulfillment of all of these things. That's what people really don't understand about Jesus. He's the fulfillment of all of these kinds of things, all of these philosophical concepts that are conundrums that seem to be completely unsolvable. You can solve them in Christ. A lot of what I was just saying was from a sermon that I heard by a guy named Doug Wilson. He's really kind of opened my eyes to a lot of different kinds of things in terms of Christ blending. He's a philosopher too, but he's a really good. He's up in Idaho. He's at a place called Moscow, Idaho. And he's really a good guy, and he really knows his stuff. And it's interesting to hear his takes on this, because he does approach the gospel from the eyes of a philosopher. And still understanding that the grounding is always the gospel. Where there's conflicts, we always defer to the gospel. But at the same time, can take this philosophical approach by saying, here's how these conundrums work themselves out in the person of Jesus Christ, and it's really interesting.
Interesting. Yeah. Douglas Wilson. I got a little copy and stuff to look into that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, you can't step in the same river twice, but now I kind of feel like I needed to ask you a couple more questions, because thinking about John Avery Whittaker, as I start to notice, you're becoming John Avery Whittaker to some extent, which is kind of neat. Good job. But
hey, you know what? I think you're the first person. This is so funny, because I think you're the first person who's noticed. You're really the first person who's noticed. I noticed it about myself a little while back. This is several years ago. I'm thinking, I think I'm becoming Whit.
I mean, that's the coolest.
I did this stuff and did this stuff, and now I'm doing this, and this is exactly what I said Whit did. And I was like, I didn't intend for that to happen, but it seems to be what's happening.
Well, I mean, creating the right flow and being able to follow it. But so what is John Avery Whittaker, and why is he so cool? Like, what's his story?
You know what? If you really want to know parts of it, you can get the art. Not to plug things here, but we've just come up with a brand new. The second book is out now. It's a 5-book series on young Whit, who he is and where he came from, and how what happened with him when he was young. Some of the interesting things. There's one thing that happened to him that I can't tell you about. You got to read it for yourself. I won't tell you. But it's an interesting thing that shaped the course of his life. And so if you really want to know who Whit is, get those books. You can read those books and find out. He's a philosopher and an inventor and a creative guy, and he's been so many things in his life. A lot of my dad is in John Avery Whittaker, from the standpoint of the time period that he grew up in. So he has a lot of those same kinds of values and outlooks on life. But
so as long as I stick to what I've heard in the radio series, I'm not spoiling any book. I hope we can talk about what we've heard through the radio series.
Sure, absolutely. Well, where are you in the? What are you listening to? Are you listening to the club? Or are you listening to just regular stuff, or what?
I've had the cassette tapes since I was.
All right. Well, you're fine then. You're fine. Then. That's good. Because what happens is the episodes are released these days in ways that for me is incomprehensible. I don't know how they're released, but I understand the episodes I think they go through the club first. And then they go through the albums. They get released on the albums, and then finally they get released on like the radio.
Yeah, I think the last time I really was keeping on, the pulse with it was push the red button was okay. So it's been a minute. I saw the live thing. Haven't been keeping on track with the newest ones. But what I do know about John Avery Whittaker is he's let's see, his mother was Scottish. He's born in Scotland. She went blind from a horse riding.
That's his stepmother.
That's his stepmother.
Yeah.
Okay.
His real mother died when she was young. When he was young, and his stepmother was the one who had an accident and blinded in a horseback riding accident. Yeah.
And he's been living all over the world. Like he started like a foundation for publishing, and then he doing translations, and then he worked for the government a bit because of his technology background. He's like a secret agent. Like, I mean, whoa. So you got this secret agent that runs.
He is. One somebody that I admired growing up. That I thought in high school was somebody that I really wanted to learn more about. I never did, but I really just cursorily learned about was Leonardo da Vinci. A Renaissance man. Wow. Somebody who did everything. And he didn't do everything. He didn't do everything to be a Renaissance man. He was just interested in everything. Yeah. So he was very much like Aristotle in that respect. He didn't do it because he was trying to do it. It's just he found everything curious. Everything was interesting. So he did this and he did that and he did this. And he happened to be, of course, remarkably talented at drawing and inventing. So he used those tools that were given him, gifted by God, to draw things out and to look at stuff and to say, this is look at how this works. Look at how things work. Notice how this happens. There must be a reason for why that happens. And so he uses a lot of experience and experimentation. And he wants to find out why does this work this way and how come this works this way. And that's basically Aristotle did the same thing. He observed everything. Aristotle was very big on there's no a priori knowledge. All of our knowledge comes from experience. It's all experiential. Whereas, of course, as Plato says, no, we have knowledge. We just forgot it, and we have to remember it. That's the reason in that famous school of Plato, this very school of philosophy, you see the two of them walking along, and Plato has his hands raised up like this, and Aristotle has his hand lowered down like this, because one of them's going, no, it's from the gods, and the other one's saying, no, it's from the earth. That's where knowledge comes from. So. But Whit is young John Avery Whittaker is inventing stuff. He's trying to figure out why things work. He's constantly doing that. He's constantly asking the right questions, and he is the right question and even the wrong questions just to see what kind of an answer he can come up with. And so he's extraordinarily accomplished. He's that kind of a person that he's just very accomplished and endlessly curious. And I did that on purpose with him in his character because I want young people. Our target audience, even younger, and then young people as they grow into their high school and college years, and even on in their lives, I want them to understand that the Christian life is not a rule book of don'ts. We are not prohibited from being curious about things because we are Christians.
Exactly.
God made this earth for us to discover and explore and figure out how he made it. I mean, that's exactly, he put that curiosity into us.
That's a decent meaning of life.
Yeah. Don't be afraid of that. Go and experience, go and do, understand your grounding. Okay. Mm-hmm. Understand that there are certain lines you're not going to cross, but why shouldn't you figure out ways to, to build a fence? There's something as simple as building a fence, building a room, finishing a room, being accomplished in that way, being endlessly curious and endlessly restless, just to try to figure out how life works. What kind of life, what is this life that we've been given, and what do we need to do with it? He's very much King David in some ways. He's just go do stuff. Let's do stuff. Let's make things. Let's do things. There's a little bit of all those great guys like that throughout history in Whit.
Oh, okay. After his search for the Qumran document, like the Q document, and his stint with the NSA and CIA, he ends up back in Odyssey. How does Whit find Whit's end? Like, what's the deal with that ancient building?
Well, that's their whole episode's about that. I'll tell you another book series. There are two book series that are released right now. The other book series that I'm doing right now is the Blackard Chronicles.
Can you explain Blackard? For anyone who doesn't know, Blackard's the enemy.
He's the enemy. He was the enemy. He was the nemesis, basically. At one point we decided that Whit needs a nemesis. It's a real threat to come in and start doing stuff around town. And the Blackard series, the book series, by the way, reveals a whole lot about why Blackard did what he did. We could only do so much in the audio dramas because you can only do so much in 24 minutes and 55 seconds of airtime. But the books delve a whole lot more deeply into what he was doing behind the scenes and how he was doing them, why he was doing what he was doing, and it all. And here's the Easter egg for you. The two book series are connected. The Young Whit book series and the Blackard book series are connected. They take place years and years apart. They're still connected. It's a lot of fun to be writing these things now. It's a whole lot of fun to be writing them because of all of the stuff we've done in the past. First of all, I go back and look at the scripts and go, wow, that was a big plot hole. I gotta plug that one up. At the time, we were just trying to make them and get them out, and I didn't realize, oh wait, there's a huge plot hole there. I gotta plug that up with something. So now I can go back and fix it. But it's been a lot of fun to write them.
I was listening to one of the ones where Jason, the son of John Avery Whittaker, is looking for Natasha, and she's blinking, doing Morse code without, all the old code encryption. And then he meets Blackard, and Blackard's like, "Oh well, we were sort of enemies, but we wished to be friends. We were always contemporaries. I could never teach him to see things my way." It's like, oh, Blackard's so cool. I forgot how cool he is.
Yeah, that's a name, not a number. Those are actually. I'm in the series right now where. The next novel, the one that I'm novelizing right now, is Waylaid in the Windy City.
Oh yeah,
And so then that's 5, and then 6 will be Name Not a Number, the one that you were talking about, and that's after Whit has gone on his journey to the Middle East. But he's going to the Middle East for a specific reason that's not in the episodes. And
really, okay,
yeah, that'll be something that's revealed in the books too. So
that's so excellent. The thing about the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Q parchment was a huge issue at the table, the dinner table. I feel like, I mean, but it was amazing. The point at the end of it is like, because everyone's got a different version of the Bible, and everyone thinks they're looking for more. Like, well, this is such an important book. What if it's missing something? Yeah. And then, what was your what was the most important point you think in trying to say, like, in Whit being, the Da Vinci searching for the uncovered truth of the Bible? Yeah. And then what's the point of that story to you?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of points. I kind of marry those shows to the Jesus Cloth. I think that came later, and the idea behind it is, what are we putting our faith in? Well, we have to put our faith in the Word of God. Yes, absolutely, and we want to make sure that we're rightly dividing the Scripture. We're getting the best translations. We're doing everything that we can. To make sure that we're handling the word of truth correctly, because it is God's word, and we want to make sure that that's the correct thing. But one of the messages of the Jesus Cloth is what are we putting our faith in? Are we putting our faith in relics, or are we putting our faith in the revealed person of Jesus Christ. And I think for me, those are sort of that's sort of the top lesson of what we're coming up with. And interestingly enough, we're delving with that in the Young Wit and the Blackard Chronicles books as well. What are we putting our faith in? How are we actually supposed to live based on what we know? And then we have to trust that the translations that we have of God's word are the translations that God wants us to have. We read the scriptures. We read them in the way that we read them. They're translated in a lot of different ways, but we have to trust that God knows what he's doing. He's either sovereign or he's not. And so I believe that he's sovereign, and I believe that he's given us the translations that we have for a reason. And that's why we have them. So
the character that you introduced at that point also, I mean, like, one of the coolest things in the world, I think. You got to work with Alan Young.
Oh yeah, from
the Time Machine, Scotsman. So what was that like? I mean, as a kid, I was obsessed.
He was a lovely, nice, extremely nice man, very gentle, very nice, and very funny, and enormously talented. And was so happy to be a part of the program, so happy to share his talent with us. He really was just a precious human being. My favorite Alan Young story from the time that we were recording was, if you remember the episode, A Question About Tasha, and that's where Tasha comes back into town after Jason has been there for a while, and she's kind of they're kind of sparking their relationship up again, and of course Tasha's not a Christian, Jason is. And so they're very worried. Connie is very worried about this whole thing, and she takes it to Jack Allen and talks to Jack about it. And he has this really touching speech about how his wife it was a similar situation for he and his wife, and how she was basically incapacitated, couldn't talk on her deathbed. He asks her the question. This is a story of Shirley Dobson. Actually, a similar thing happened to her father. But asks her a question: do you believe in Jesus Christ? Please say that you believe in Jesus Christ. Please accept him as your savior. And she couldn't answer. She couldn't answer him because she couldn't talk. And so she died, and he doesn't have any idea whether she answered affirmatively or not. He's going to have to wait until he gets to heaven to find out. So he, of course, performed this magnificently. And we always have read-throughs, and we always have stuff in the studio. And so during the read-through, when he did that scene, he stopped after the scene and couldn't go on. He was very emotionally moved by it. And we were stunned in the studio that he did it so well, just in the read-through that he did it so well. And he said, I'm going to have to take a little break, fellas. I have to take a little break, fellas. And we said, oh, is everything all right? He goes, no. He said, everything's okay, but you just need to warn me before you do stuff like this. So we said, okay, go ahead and take a break. What we didn't know is this happened to him in real life too. This happened to him with his wife.
Wow. A
similar situation happened to him in real life with his wife, and it just brought back all sorts of memories for him. And yeah, it was so heartfelt and so touching. And we apologize. He said, no, don't apologize. It's something that needs to be out there, but you just got to warn me before we start. If you're going to do something like that, just give me a little warning ahead of time.
This is not Mr. Ed. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the really amazing thing about Odyssey and about all the people who want to work on it with us. And because a lot of them, they're Hollywood actors, they're people who are famous for other things long time, and they've been jaded by the business, and most of what they do, they have to, especially cartoon voice people, the way you do cartoon voices these days is you're in the studio alone. You're not with all the other actors, you're by yourself, and then you just basically, they hand you the copy and you do the lines 5 times. Da 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 da. And then you walk and you go, yeah, very good, thank you, you're wrapped, and you walk out and you collect your paycheck and you go home. But a lot of people are thinking this is not exactly what I had in mind, and what I envisioned that the business was about. But that is the business, Well, we give them a chance to go and do what they got into show business to do in the first place, which is act. You get to come in and you get to perform. Everybody's in the studio with us. You get to, bounce lines off of each other and see who's got the funnier line and see who's got the better line and all that stuff. We do all of that.
But also for the right reasons, Yeah. This the thing about Alan. I could tell even as a kid that he had that, like, there's that tune in from God feeling in him that he's like, I'm supposed to be here making this show with these people. This is what I'm supposed to do before I go to heaven. And that episode, the question for Tasha is one, like, I have not, every time I've ever dated a woman, ever since I was a kid, I always think about that episode. Like, that's a really impactful one, because it ends up being, come on, this generation's the least dedicated to each other or to God that we've seen in quite some time, and it just I'd never had that understanding that that's what he'd been through. It actually helps.
Sure. Yeah, and you never right, and you never know. You never know when you're going to do something that's going to really. Katie Lee has told us innumerable times. How did you know that I was going through this? She'll come in to record an episode, and she'll say, "This is exactly what I'm going through with my family right now, or this is exactly what's happening with my son or my daughter and I right now. This is exactly what I've been. How did you know? Do you have a microphone in my house? This is amazing." And we say, well, we're trying to record the human condition here, and especially the human condition as it relates to Christians. And these are all things that Christians are going to go through, just in different ways. They're going to present themselves in different ways, but the theories are all the same, and the ethics are all the same, the morals are all the same. So, and the universal truths are all the same. They're unchanging. So it's what we try to hit.
This is Chris.
Yes, Chris Anthony.
A Barbie commercial.
Yeah. Well, Barbie is Chris. Chris Anthony played Barbie. She was the voice of Barbie.
Chris Anthony.
Katie and Chris.
So how did you guys? How do these people find their way into your show? Like, how does this work for them?
Well, in the early days, we were looking for actors, obviously, and Katie's story is fun because she plays Connie Kindle. She's Katie and Will and Chris. Katie and Will and Chris have played Connie, Eugene, and Chris, the host, ever since the show started. That's got to be some kind of a record. They've been the same characters in the same show, no breaks for 32 years. That's pretty remarkable, I think. So it's got to be some sort of record. But at any rate, for Katie, she was literally driving down the freeway when we were located in Arcadia, California. That was back when Focus on the Family was in Arcadia. And she was on her way to some clinic or something, and she was listening to the Focus on the Family broadcast. And that happened to be a broadcast, providentially, that we had done a drama on. And we also put into that broadcast that we're going to be doing an ongoing dramatic series, and we want actors and actresses, and we need help with it, and we would like to see what happens. Well, she happened to be, I don't know, I don't remember exactly what the verbiage was that we put into the Focus broadcast, but she was listening to it and happened to be driving right past where we were. The Focus on the Family headquarters at that point was right off the 210 freeway in Arcadia, California. She was driving right there. She got off the freeway. She came up to the building. She knocked on the door. She opened up. She said, "I'm an actress and I want to be on your show. What is the show?" So we didn't have a show at that point. That was way before we even had a show. That was before Odyssey ever started. So she was just bold and walked right up and said, "Hey, here I am. How you doing? Here I am. I want to do it." And of course, she has this eternally youthful voice. She sounds like a teenager. But Katie is as Connie. She plays kids and she plays teenagers, and that's what she plays, and she's great at it. But we said, okay, well, we're gonna, we'll do it. I mean, you seem like she gave us her demo tape, which I think they still have some places, her demo tape, even after all these years. And she had great credits. She was on a lot of Disney stuff. She was in Dumbo Circus, and she was one of the gummy bears. And she
That's
was
right.
Darkwing Duck, and she was on lots of different things. So she has a great resume. And so we said, yeah, as soon as we're ready to go, we'll let you know. So periodically she'd call up and say, "You ready to go?" "No, we're still in development." "You ready to go?" "We're still in development." "Ready to go?" "No, we're still in development." So finally we got the show going. We were there, and we had written Connie Comes to Town. We had written the episodes, and we called her up and said, okay, we had moved to Pomona by this time. We said, "Okay, we're ready. Come on in." And she said, "I just had a baby. I can't come in." I can't come in. I just had a baby. Why didn't you call me sooner?" I was like, we weren't ready sooner. She goes, "Well, I can't. I have a baby. Unless I bring him into the studio, I won't be able to come." And I thought, and we sat for a minute. We put her on hold. We said, "Well, what do we do? Well, we really want her. Well, what do we?" So we got back on the phone and said, "Well, does this called Focus on the Family. Go ahead and bring your baby. Come on in.
Yes.
So she came in, and we had, there were folks there who were more than happy to watch Adam, that was her son, to watch him while she came in and did Connie Comes to Town and did the episodes, and she stayed with the program. She's been with the program ever since. Eugene, Will Ryan was in Family Portraits. Katie was in Family Portraits too. She did one episode of Family Portraits.
And Will also does the voice of Harlow Doyle, right?
Yeah, Harlow. He does a
I
ton
love
of
that.
other voices. I think Will just recently surpassed his 100th voice that he has done on Odyssey, different characters. So he does a lot of different kind of characters. But
yeah, he's incredible.
So and he was on again. Yeah, he was on. Hal Smith was with Katie Lee and Will Ryan on Dumbo Circus, and we had used Hal prior to any other dramas that we had ever done. We'd used Hal in them. Focus on the Family dramas, Gone Fishing, and something else. I don't remember, a couple of other ones. And so we used Hal. He was great, and he worked with them. And he was the one who said, I worked with this young guy, Will Ryan. He was a young guy at that point. This young guy, Will Ryan, really talented. Why don't you bring him in? And so we brought, on Hal Smith's recommendation, we brought Will Ryan in, and Will did that one part on Family Portraits. And then later on, we said, you know what, Will could do this other part here too with Eugene. But Will played Officer Harley before he played Harlow Doyle, and we had to get rid of Officer Harley because we got some negative mail about him. But that was fun.
It's funny. I remember writing mail, and so in retrospect, I understand what you guys had to go through. It's rough. Well, let's see. First thing is applesauce. I've got this on here. I was at some point going to ask, why applesauce? Because that's such a cool name for a program.
Well, think about it. Think about it for just a second. Think about it from an allegorical standpoint.
Straight up the biblical. It's just take a bite of the applesauce.
Think about who Whit, Connie, and Eugene would represent in the biblical narrative.
Okay.
There
you go.
So when you see it that way, you look at it and say, oh, I see. So Whit is basically the father, the creator.
And says, don't take the applesauce.
And Connie and Eugene are Adam and Eve. Basically, Whit says to Adam, to Eugene, I want to show you something, but you can't tell anybody about it, and you can never use it. Don't do it. So don't do all of this. It's not a perfect one-to-one allegory, but it's close. And of course, what happens is Eve comes in, who's curious, and she doesn't like the fact that she's been left out of things. And so she comes in and she uses it when she's not supposed to. And so then they disobey, basically, is what happens. They disobey. And as a result of disobedience, as a result of Adam and Eve's disobedience, they got kicked out of the Garden of Eden. As a result of Connie and Eugene's disobedience, they got kicked out of Whit's Inn.
And eventually applesauce gets, Whit has to destroy it because it's so powerful for even the government or corporations. Well, okay, the thing is,
there's something
really well.
I also have to say something else. There's something special about applesauce that appears in the books too. So
I'm pretty stoked. I'm glad that we're doing that sound. Well, today's sauce is source, so in source code, you say the source, so it's the sauce. It's pretty good. I think we at some point started mentioning that you had this idea for the Iliad, which was like kind of how I ended up reaching out at any one point. I was like, oh, the Lollar's doing stuff? What? Like, I want to know more about that.
Yeah.
So how did the Iliad come up in your mind?
Well, okay. First of all, I'll just mention that, we have the Odyssey and the Iliad. So that's the next thing. And I'm like, okay, so sue me. But this is another thing that here's another lesson that I always tell my students, and I tell everybody else who's really interested in writing: never throw anything away. Never throw anything away. So two things happen. Two separate things happen as far as Iliad House is concerned. The first thing that happened was as a writer, you're always coming up with ideas, always coming up with different kinds of things. So I had a friend that I went years and years ago. We went to a film school together, and I thought he's a really good guy, and I'd like to partner up with him. And he was wanting to partner up with me to do a project. We never actually did anything together, but we talked about it a lot. And one of the things that we talked about that I talked about was, how about if we do, I really like time travel. How about if we, and I think kids like trains. So how about if we have this time traveling train, And then I just started thinking about ideas about it. And he was like, wow, that's really great. I really like that idea. So I put it in the back of my head, but we never did anything with it. It was just in the back of my head. So around the same time, I think it was around the same time, we were talking about at Focus on the Family about Odyssey and the nature of Odyssey and what Odyssey was and what more we wanted to do with Odyssey. And I pitched that I think we should do a spin-off for Odyssey. I said, I think we have, if you look at Focus on the Family, there's a lot of resources for little kids, babies up through toddlers. And then we have Odyssey for their elementary school years up through junior high. And then we have a lot of resources for young adults and young parents and then older people going all the way through to death, basically. But we got virtually nothing for teenagers. There was almost nothing for teenagers.
We need it.
So I said, well, why don't we do something with teenagers and spin off some of these characters and put them in their own series. So let's take Eugene and make him have him go to the university to Campbell County Community College as a full-time adjunct professor, an assistant professor. Let's put him as a professor. Let's take Connie, graduate her from high school, stick her in that situation, and take a few of the other characters along, create some new characters. So that way we're dealing with issues that affect teens, affect high schoolers and college age young people. And then let's make Jason the head of their house. Their house would be called Iliad House. And so I came up with the Iliad House line a long time ago. And so they were thinking about it, and the powers that be, Kurt Bruner was the executive vice president at that point. He said, "Sounds like a good idea. It sounds like a good idea." But for reasons, for various and sundry reasons, it never came about. Okay, we didn't do it. But I kept the idea in the back of my brain. I like the idea of Iliad House. I like the idea of it, centering around time travel, or just centering around certain things that are dealing with certain issues for older kids. So I went back to school. Like I said, I went through everything. Decided I need some more skill set, enhance my skill set. Went back to school, got master's degrees, got all my degrees, and went back through the master's program. And in the master's program, of course, you have to come up with a script and you have to have a thesis, a master's thesis, an MFA for the MFA, and you're going to have to defend it. It's the whole bit. It's just very, very doctoral. And so I pulled out of my files the time train. I was, I'm going to write this up. And because I had to write it up, I had to write up all of the supporting materials with it, which was 30 or 40 pages of time travel theory, how time travel actually works, what happens in time travel, where does it go? What just all of those kinds of things. And I said, well, what am I going to call this? I don't want to call it time. I call that Time Train. I call that script the Time Train. And had basically the characters that are in Iliad House in the Time Train, but it was a feature film script. So it was 2 hours long. And then all this support documentation that went along with it. And was able to use that. That was my thesis. And so I graduated based on that script and got my degrees and all that sort of stuff. And then about 2 years later, I think it was about 2 years later, I got a call from some people who work for the HSLDA, which is the Homeschool Defense League, Defense League Association or something like that, whatever it is. And they have a group of young people who grew up on Odyssey and knew my work, and they contacted me about stuff and had me come out and do a seminar with them. I was doing a seminar on writing and how to do script writing for teenagers. And while we were there, we were talking about what can we do. They wanted to do a project, and they wanted to see if we could do a Kickstarter fund and create a project and do everything. So I said, well, let me see what I can come up with. So I took my thesis basically and said, rather than make it one whole long 2-hour thing, let me break it up into a series. I'll see if I can break it up into 6 parts. We'll do a 6-part series. And so I just basically broke up my thesis into a 6-part series, changed some of the stuff, changed some of the characters, changed a few of the situations, added the narrator basically to it, added some other parts to it. And then I said, what do I want to call this? Well, I don't want to call it Time Train. That doesn't sound right, because I don't want it to be just about time travel. I want it to be about more than that. So I'll call it Iliad House. I reached back into my brain and went, oh, I love the file. I love that name, Iliad House. So I'll do Iliad House. That'll be the character. That'll be the name. And that's basically how it came about. And so we did the Kickstarter campaign, got the funds necessary to get us launched, get a website up, get it launched, and for me to be able to produce the series. And the fun thing about that series is I normally don't do this, but I did it on this series, which is I did all the production on it too. A good portion of the production. I had some help from Daniel Noah, who was also one of the partners on it, and then also a friend of mine named Craig Shibley, who we paid to do that. But the bulk of the production ended up being my production, and I just really loved it. I thought it was so much fun to do, because that was not a side of the radio drama, the audio drama venue that I have actually did a lot of before. I did a little things, but I never had taken on a full-time, full-blown audio drama. And just loved it. Thought it was great. And I had so much fun with it. And my whole thing was you know, I was preaching the gospel of everybody. You know, if you have an iPad, if you have an iPhone, if you have a computer these days, you've got your own sound system right there. You can produce it all on your own. You don't need anything else. You don't need all this. Technology has now caught up with us, and we can do this stuff all on our own. It's great. It's great. It's great. And so finally, I had to put my money where my mouth was and say, okay, well, I'm going to show you. Here's how it can be done. So the fun thing about it was I'm here in California. None of the actors are in California. All of them are in different places, scattered all over the country. Most of the lead character, Jesse, lives in Virginia, and Stu, his friend, lives in Virginia, and our lead actress lives in Canada. And so none of them were in the same room at the same time recording any of their lines. So I was just directing them by phone, recording their lines. They recorded their lines there, sent their lines to me. So all of their lines were recorded separately. They were sent to me in different places using different microphones, different rooms, different room sounds. And every character was like that. There weren't any characters that were recorded in the same room. They were all over the country. And so it really was incumbent upon me to direct them properly, to remember what the actors were saying that they were playing off of, because they didn't have any actors that they were playing off of. Everybody was just playing off of me. And so it was really important for me to do that. And then I had to cut it all together. Had to make sure I knew how to get in there and do the technical stuff of normalizing it, making everything sound like it was all coming from the same studio, and doing all the noise gates and all the other stuff that had to happen.
It's a really beautiful recording. I had no idea.
It was all pieced together. It was, I have these pieces. Now I got to put it all together, and had a great composer. Justin Durbin was one of I told him to record 8, give me 8 pieces that I need just 8 generic pieces, and I gave him what I wanted: adventurous and sad and this, and I said, just give me two a piece on them. That's all the money we had to pay it, but all of the other, there was other music that I just did needle drops on. You pay for needle drops, and you can put them you can use them as long as you give them credit for it. So Sound Dogs is a great place to find those things. And then the same thing with the sound effects, you know, then coming in and doing Foley and all that stuff. It was all done right around my neighborhood. Any kind of the Foley, any of them walking through the forest or the brushes or any of that sort of stuff was all just me walking around using my field recorder and doing all that stuff, and then putting it all together and figuring out how it works. And for me, I'm looking at it and say, I don't care if anybody doesn't like this at all. I like it. Yeah. I think other people like, because I keep getting emails from everybody saying, when's the next series coming out? The fun thing for me about Iliad House was, and this ties into the most popular film that is in existence right now, which is Endgame. And I'm sorry if nobody's seen it, but a lot of time travel figures prominently in Endgame and in the Avengers Endgame. And time travel figures prominently in a lot of stories. And one thing that I wanted to do differently about time travel that I hadn't seen anybody else do before with Iliad House was in time travel is a means to an end in most time travel stories. So they make a big deal about, for instance, in Back to the Future, a big deal is made in 2 or 3 scenes about the DeLorean being a time machine. Great. But then time travel is really just a means to an end. Yeah. How do we get you from here to there? How do we get, and then the whole story, the time travel element is virtually forgotten. Once you're there back in time, then you have the adventure, and the time travel element is virtually forgotten. I said, I want time travel to be an end here. How do I make that happen? And I don't want to give anything away in case somebody hasn't heard it, but basically that's what Stu does. Stu is making time travel an end, not a means. That's what goes on here, and that's kind of the whole crux here of the story, is that of the episodes, is that it's all about time travel. It's not using time travel just as a story device to get someplace else. So that's what I kind of thought was fun about it. Is makes it a little bit more unique, more of a twist on the whole time travel venue.
Everything about it is very Lollard. Let's say I like this. As soon as I saw Iliad, I was like, okay, this is gonna be good.
I like ancient Greek poems, sue me.
So another thing is, you said, I think at some point, I don't know, you're a professor, right? Like you do some school stuff.
I am. Yes.
So I mean, it makes a little sense. You're good at explaining things. So where and why do you teach? What is it that you're
teach at Azusa Pacific University. I teach in the Cinematic Arts Department. I also am still I teach writing classes in the Cinematic Arts Department. So I teach writing the short film. I'll teach screenplay writing, intermediate screenplay writing, and I'll also teach a required course called Writing 2. The university has certain requirements for writing. They have Writing 1, Writing 2, which is a sophomore, junior class. A few other, I have taught and still would love to teach quite a few other courses. One of my favorites is Christianity and the Creative Process, which was a really fun class to teach. Studies in Popular Culture was another really great, fun class to teach. I've also taught audio broadcast journalism, in which basically, you got this thing here, this iPhone, you can be a broadcaster almost instantly. Go out and get the stories and start doing stuff with it, because it's got a good microphone, it's got a good camera, and there's editing software, apps that you can use to edit down very easily. And they have to do audio dramas in that class too, just to give them a different taste of how audio dramas work. So I've taught public address, public speaking, public address, things like that. So I've taught quite a few classes over there, 10 or 12 different kinds of classes over at APU, and I've really been thankful for the opportunity to teach there. I taught at Cal State Los Angeles before I taught over at APU. So what I love about teaching is being in the classroom. I love interacting with the students. We learn together. That's for me is it. If you're going to make education a career, the first thing that you try to do is get out of the classroom. You want to be an administrator. You want to be, either the head of a department or up to a dean or an administrator or the president of a university, because that's where you make the most money. You don't make money. You don't make a lot of money as a professor. You make more money if you're full-time or if you're tenured. But as an adjunct or as an assistant or associate professor, you don't make a whole lot of money. So the idea, if you want to climb in your career, and I don't fault anybody for this, you want to climb in your career, you become an administrator. But if you want to teach, you stay in the classroom. I like being in the classroom. That's why I'm an adjunct. I like being in the classroom. I don't want to have to deal with meetings. When you become an administrator, when you become a dean or an administrator or the head of a department, you're involved in a whole lot of administrative nightmare, bureaucracy, and fundraising. And I'm a terrible fundraiser. I don't know how to do all that stuff. I can't schmooze the way really great fundraisers can schmooze to get money out of people. I don't do that very well. So I'm like, I have no designs on being the head of a department. Even if I were to work here full time, I still just want to be in the classroom. That's really what I want. I just want to teach. I want to be in the classroom with the students. That's really what I want. What I hate about it, what I really hate about it, is grading. I hate grading. It's just mind-numbing. It's the worst. So for me, a great best of all worlds would be, can I teach without grading? What's the scenario for me to teach people without grading? And I'm thinking, well, maybe it's public speaking. Maybe what I need to do is go and do seminars at different places, get a bunch of people in who really want to be there, teach. We'll learn together, but I don't have to grade anything. I don't want to grade anything.
That's a great idea, actually. I would definitely go to one of those. What's something that you don't get asked about, that you don't get to talk about, that you wish you could talk about more,
Wow, that's a good question. I would say it's things like philosophy, but I always manage to kind of twist things around into philosophy anyway. I can't really think of anything that I'd really love to talk about that I haven't been asked about. I can't think of anything like that. it would get into the weeds too much if it were things like political stuff. I don't really want to.
Yeah.
I don't mind talking about that with like-minded people or with people who want to have a decent
Right,
conversation. Yeah. But it's just not at the forefront of what I
Right.
really like talking about.
Absolutely.
I would add the caveat there, though, that I look at politics as a means. I look at political discussions as a means to introduce ethical concepts and moral concepts into the conversation. And so I always marveled when I studied philosophy. I always marveled at the ability of people, the people that I read, to talk about, to come up with concepts of morality or ethics or how we behave or how we are to live. And they would do thought experiments and things like that about how we are to live, theory of mind and things like that. And I always thought I would really love to be able to apply that to real life. As I was saying earlier, I'd like to be, it's not enough to just talk about this in an academic setting. I think we need to talk about this in real life. How do we apply all this stuff? And if only there were things that were happening in the world outside that you could apply these things easily to, that people could see, look, this is just a matter of blah, blah, blah. You think this has not happened before? This is it right here. Well, we're rife with that right now. I mean, good grief. Our whole society is just rife with one thing after another, where you can pull out a philosophical concept. You can talk about a religious philosophical concept or both, an ethical concept or moral concept, and say, can't you see how this applies? Can't you see how we're repeating the same thing that's happened in other societies over and over? How can you not see that? How can we be so blind? And it's a really interesting lesson, I think, for all of us. And that is, I used to wonder, how could people follow Hitler? Couldn't they see what a buffoon the guy was? Couldn't they see what a monster he was? How could people actually be taken in by this guy? And then you look around and you say, okay, I think I know. I think I know how that can happen these days. I think people are following philosophy. They're not necessarily following a person, but they're following a train of thought that leads to genocide, that leads to murder and death on a scale that's been unprecedented since basically World War II. And I think, wow, this is happening right in front of us now. Can't we see it? I grew up in an era where that was unthinkable. It was completely unthinkable because it was so close to the era of World War II. But now we're 40 years removed from that. And so people have forgotten because we didn't teach our kids. We didn't teach our young kids to think about this stuff. So,
but also kids have been taught the other direction. So there's also many people from your generation. I'm sorry, but that just made me think also. So my mom, she tries to do so much good in the universe, and then she's got her friends, and in the end, there's a lot of what they're trying to do is lobbying for limitations of constitutional rights. I mean, that ends up being the end thing, and so it makes it kind of difficult because the end isn't what it was like when we were trying to save rights. It's like trying to keep people safe from people's rights, you know? And that's what they're all worried about now.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, what we haven't done is sufficiently educated people, or remember even ourselves, even our generation. So your mom's generation is probably the same generation as me, but we haven't thought through the issues ourselves carefully enough to realize that what we've done is take away or denigrate or mock the very thing that will hold our freedoms in check. That's not government. We think that what's happened is we've replaced God with government. We think government will now be the one that we rely on to hold our freedoms in check. Whereas the earlier generation says, no, we don't want government holding our freedom. And that's the exact opposite of what we want. What we need is God, belief in God, responsibility, personal holiness. Those things will hold our freedoms in check. Yes, you have freedom, but you should be responsible. You should hold yourself in check. Well, that was what the 60s and 70s effectively eliminated.
Right.
All of that wantedness and free love and all of that sort of stuff just effectively tore down that barrier, that wall right there. And so now people are going, we've got rampant sexual diseases. We've got rampant problems. We've got, all this bad stuff. The roosters
Crowley and
we've got the roosters have come home to roost right now on all this bad stuff. So and because we've eliminated God, what else can we use to put checks on our freedom? Well, we've got to turn to government now. And that's like, this is very much like the White Witch in the Chronicles of Narnia. This is very much like in Prince Caspian, when they had already gotten rid of the White Witch. And in Prince Caspian now, he has to go against his uncle King Miraz. And so the bad dwarf, Nickabrick, whoever, takes them down into the cave, remember? And when they're down there, who does he see? He sees a specter, he sees a witch, and he sees the werewolf. And they say, you know, when our people were ruling Narnia, we didn't have to worry about any of this stuff. We didn't have to worry about usurping this. Let us help you make Narnia great again. And it's like, okay, if that's not what we're seeing, my generation up through Reagan eliminated communism. We tore down the wall, tore down the Berlin Wall, and outspent the Soviets into oblivion. Tore it down completely. Communism was on the outs. We were the lone superpower in the world. Look at what our kids are doing, running toward it with open arms. Well, they just didn't do it right. So basically what they're doing is inviting the White Witch to come back into our society. Let's get the
and it's this amazing sense of narcissism and ego. If you think that you could do it better than anyone else has been unable to do it before, you're the one to fix it. And then also I just saw this post. Someone said, it was a lady in Austria. It was like, why can't you get rid of all of your weapons? We just got rid of all of our weapons in Austria in 1 month. And I'm like, are you talking about right now or in the 30s? I was confused.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect answer.
But okay, so that was beautiful. I'm glad that you talk philosophy when you talk politics. That's the right way to do it.
I hope so. You know, that's exactly what I want younger people and everybody to think about. We have to think about it in those terms. We are not the first people to think of this stuff. That's why we need to read good philosophy, have good philosophy teachers, and why we need to read history. We are not the first people to try or think of this stuff.
My dad, when I was a little kid, he handed me, when I was like, Dad, what if I'm thinking thoughts and I'm in someone else's head or something? I don't remember exactly. I was like 4 years old. And he's like, come over here. And he showed me a bookshelf. And he's like, these are all the philosophy books I had to send away for, you know, the whole set. Like, here's book 1. Start here. Finish these. And then you'll have pretty much, you'll have answered those questions and you'll have new questions that you can answer yourself.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
We've been talking about, we're talking towards people that are listening, and that's amazing. But there are people that aren't. Yeah. And you mentioned some of how that happened, like the post Aleister Crowley new 60s revolution times has changed. We have anti-theists. We've this a new kind of person. How do you talk? Because I'm and this is a genuine question. How do you talk to people, and how do you try? What is something that you could say to people that are just so, that are atheists? They think they are.
Yeah, I think that I just heard a really good discussion about this with on Ben Shapiro's show. He just talked to a guy this past Sunday, and I can't remember his name, but it was really a good discussion. He talked to, in fact, let me see if I can get his name, because that was
for sure.
It's a really good conversation. But basically, his take on it was. He was asked that very same question. William Lane Craig. Get that episode of the Sunday edition with Ben Shapiro. But basically, he said he thought the best way to approach it was from the moral question. Don't talk about necessarily walking in with a theistic idea about things, but approach it from the moral question, which is you have a morality, don't you? What is your morality? How does this work? You have a line over which you will not cross. This also comes is blended with a lot of what Doug Wilson has said in the past too. It's the idea of we have a how do you decide what you want to do? How do you decide how you want to live? And is it just whatever I want, I'll do whatever I want, or is it that you have a code that you follow? Is it how do you decide what to do and how to do and what to do right? And if you can, and surprisingly enough, I've discovered, along with William Craig Lane, I've discovered in my own classes that young people really want to talk about this.
Yeah,
they really do want to talk. They don't want to talk about God, but they do want to talk about morality. They do want to talk about how do we live? What are we supposed to do? What's the best way to live? How do we do good for others? What are we supposed to do? Is doing good for others even something that we should do?
Do what thou wilt, or do what's right.
Yeah. So I agree with both of them in that respect. If you can approach it from the moral question, what moral code do you hold? How do you talk when you say we're going to throw God out of the equation? Yes, but you still live according to some sort of moral code. What is that code? Is it yourself? You just decide what you're going to do in any way, shape, or form. Is it nothing? Is the only constant inconstancy? They quickly come to the realization that if there are no rules, if there are no morals, then it's a self-defeating proposition. And so they have to have some sort of way of thinking about their lives and about what they want to do and how they want to live. And once you can agree that, okay, we're going to be talking about some standard, some sort of standard that we have, then you have to naturally leads to, well, who's the standard giver? Who's the standard bearer? Who is the one who came up with that? Why do you live that way? Do you think you just came up with that on your own? Well, you don't. If you say that we shouldn't murder people, where did you get the idea that we shouldn't murder? That murder is wrong. Where did you get the idea that this is not the right way to live? This is bad, or that doing good, self-sacrifice is a good thing? Where did you get the idea behind that? And once we start getting into the ideas and the topics, see what the problem that a lot of people have is that they've read Nietzsche, and they've read Nietzsche way too soon.
That's probably my problem.
They read Nietzsche way too soon. You have to understand who Nietzsche was a brilliant guy. I don't want to take away anything from Nietzsche, but he was also a loon bag.
Yeah,
he was a guy,
and no one ever finishes it. They never read the part where they
right.
Where he's like, "My bad, I was crazy."
Yeah.
He said that.
By the way, I'm dying of syphilis because I actually lived out these things.
Whoops.
Whoops. They just love the idea of no God and freedom, ultimate freedom, and be your own person. And Jesus Christ was the last Christian. You should be, the person that you are. They love that idea. And that's very attractive to young people. Of course, good grief, no rules. But then they screw up their own lives and then go, how come my life is so bad? How come my life is so strange? How come my life is so awful? And well, it's because you didn't, you weren't the first one to think of these things. That's the point. Learn from people who went before you. Learn from those folks. And then you can't get into the moral car just to drive it into the ditch. You can't do that. You can't, you want to say, I believe this because I have my code of standards and we shouldn't do this and we shouldn't do that. But there's no God. There's no standard giver. There's no this. Well, you can't do that. You can't. We're not designed that way. We're not. That's not who we are. So my big thing is also been that's a very interesting conversation to have. It's a lot of fun to have those kinds of conversations. But where it gets really sticky is in the field of art. That's where it gets very sticky, because from my standpoint, I believe, and this is something that I preach very, very, very much so, that God is the God of everything. He is in control of everything. He is sovereign over all. That includes art. And as soon as you say that, the hackles start going up on the back of, you can see the students kind of go, wait a minute, I don't want God into my art. I want to like what I like, and I don't want to dislike what I want what I want. Right. And so they immediately bring up the objections. Well, art is whatever I think it is. Art is art is who's to say what is artistic and what isn't? Who's to say there is no standard for art? And I say, how can there be standards of morality? How can there be standards in math? How can there be standards in all the rest of creation? There's standards for all of them that everybody can debate about, but basically agree upon, but no standards for art. No standards for what good art is. Why do we think that art is the exception to every single other thing? That we shouldn't be saying that there are objective standards of art. There's no way to say that there are objective standards of art. I think, well, yeah, there are. If you believe in God, if you believe in a creator, if you believe in a designer, go look at the Grand Canyon. Go look at the Rocky Mountains. Go look at the ocean at sunset. Why was it designed that way? Why is it that way? If there's no designer, if there's no grand designer behind it, why is it so beautiful? Why is it simply just not functional? That's it. Why is it? In fact, why do we even have mountains? Snow-capped mountains. Why do we even have those grand vistas? Why do we have that? That makes it hard. It makes it hard to get from one place to the other. How can we have that? Why? And if we have those, well, if we have to have obstacles, okay, well, so evolutionarily designed, blah, 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 we have to have obstacles. Why do they have to be beautiful? Why isn't it just a big, huge stone gray wall that we have to get over? Why are these mountains so remarkably, unbelievably beautiful? Well, you can go through Scripture time and time again, and you see what God created. God, again, the creation chapters, great, all that stuff happens, and then later on, when God's saying, "Here's the temple that I want you to build. Here are the exacting standards of what I want you to do. Here's how the ark is supposed to be laid out. Here's how the temple is supposed to be laid out. Here's what I want. Here, when you have these worship objects that I'm going to give you, I'm going to tell you what to do with them: the laver and the candlestick and the ark, and here's how I want you to build it, and here's exactly what it's supposed to look like. And I want you to use, by the way, gold and polish it up and make it look real shiny." Why? That's not a standard. That's not a standard of art. That's not a standard of what looks good and what doesn't look good. Well, now all you're doing is saying that everything should be religious in nature. It's not art if it's not religious in nature. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying apply God's standards to whatever art you do. That's what I'm saying. And align and by the way, this has nothing to do with what you like and dislike. It has nothing to do with your personal likes and dislikes. You can like whatever you want. You can dislike whatever you want. You're a free agent as far as that's concerned. It has nothing to do with it. But I would hope that a thinker, somebody who is truly interested in truth, would start to align what they like with the standard, the objective standard. That you would start to see why the objective standard is the objective standard and realign your likes to coalesce with the standard. That's what I would hope anybody would do who is a seeker of truth.
That's okay. So now I just have to ask, as Americans, as Californians, and we've been around atheists, but we've also been around people that believe in aesthetic and God to an extent, energy, they've created this creation myth, even if it's not the creator myth. You got this, we were saying the new world, the new age movement, like the Aleister Crowley, post Aleister Crowley, let's separate from evil and we'll just have. So I've known plenty of, I had more Wiccans teaching in my public school than I had Christians for sure. And and I have to ask also, what do you say to people? Why do you, if you see it, at some point, if someone actually they can't help but look when they think God shows them something, what do you say to them to make sure that they pursue that and not go away from it? Like, why be good instead of evil?
Well, you have to test it with Scripture. You always have to test it with Scripture. Test it philosophically, test it by core sensibilities. Does this seem right to you? Okay, so that's one thing that you can do, but the bottom foundation always has to be tested against Scripture. So if what you're doing is absolutely blatantly going against God's word, and that's the reason you have to really understand Scripture. You have to really, because something may seem like it's right along the line of what God, isn't this what God wants? No, it isn't. Because they're only picking and choosing verses. I just had a long conversation recently, a Facebook conversation along these lines. Somebody cherry picked a verse from Ecclesiastes, and the verse from Ecclesiastes was, "So I discerned that it was it was good. Everything the ultimate good was for men to eat and drink and enjoy their work." And they posted that one, and there were all sorts of, "Oh yes, amen, that's fantastic, isn't that great?" And I posted, "How sad." And they were like, "How sad? What are you talking about?" Do you understand the context of this? Do you understand what he's talking about here? The context of this whole verse is life is meaningless. I've looked at life from all these different angles, every way I could possibly look. That verse comes at the end of, there's a time for everything, a time to reap, a time to sow, a time to... That's the end of the chapter. That's what he's concluded. He's looked at all of these different things, lived as much of an experience as he's looked, if it's Solomon who's writing that, lived all of these had all these experiences, and the best he can come up with is, okay, the pinnacle of existence is to eat and drink and enjoy your work. That's it? I can think of a whole lot better things to do than just eat and drink and enjoy your work. How about raising kids? How about worshiping God? How about, doing good for others? How about self-sacrifice? How about all of these different kinds of things that you can do that are far more meaningful than just eat, drink, and enjoy your life? He's saying life is so meaningless. The best we can hope for is to eat, drink, and enjoy our work. That's it. Like, you can't just cherry pick these things. You can't just go in and say, oh, look at this. This is great. And of course, they were really trying to say, well, I'm interpreting it this way. Well, I'm interpreting it that way. Well, what I mean is this, that's exactly the wrong thing to do. You can't just go, I'm going to interpret it this way. And it means this to me, but it can mean anything to anybody else. No, it means what it means. We take the Bible the way the Bible presents itself. We do not try to say, but I'm going to twist it to make it what I want it to say. That's exactly the wrong thing to do. But
there's even a footnote not to do that.
Right. But a lot of people don't think that. See how easy it is to get into that kind of a mindset. It's so easy to get into the mindset of saying, but I'm just doing this now for me. This is what my personal meaning of this. I can draw a lot of joy from that personal meaning. Why can't I do that? How come that's wrong? Why can't I just take this little verse here and say, for me, as I'm applying it to my life, this is really, really good? Because it's not good. That's not what the meaning of the verse is. It's totally wrong. It's totally the opposite of what you think it is. That's why there's so many other verses that talk about fulfillment. Go pick one of them. There are tons of verses that talk about encouragement and meaning and worship and how life has full meaning in the body of Christ, and how all these other things. There's all sorts of wonderful verses that you could pick to talk about enjoying your life and why God made a life for us to enjoy. Go pick them. Why are you picking this one? This one's saying the exact opposite.
Phil, you're the best. I can't believe it. You did this. It's so wonderful.
Well, thank you for this talk. This has been wonderful.
You're the best.
Thanks,
you.
man. Thanks. Good talking to you. Where is this airing right now?
This program is coming to you via Relay 2 satellite, a spacecraft orbiting the Earth at a speed of over 17,000 miles per hour.
Xirtus.